Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for your participation from different time zones. I'm Masako Oda, Chief of Advocacy Action Against Child Exploitation ACE Japan, and I'm going to moderate this session. The title of this session is Promoting CSO Business Government Collaboration in the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor towards the achievement of SDG 8.7. ACE is honored to organize this session, and I'd like to thank you for the Secretariat for your support. We have 4 distinguished guests, 5 distinguished guests. One is actually coming soon in different positions and from all over the world. Let me briefly introduce them. Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi from India. Good to see you, Kailash-ji. Can you hear me? Right. And Miss Anushka from France. And Ms. Lisa Singh from Australia. And Mr. Andrew Adoche Tagoe is, we hope, coming soon. And Ms. Yuka Iwatsuki from Japan. Right. So after an opening remark by Chair of Alliance 8.7, Ms. Anushka, and a keynote speech by Mr. Kailash Satyarthi, we'll have a panel discussion followed by Q&A. In this breakout session, we are going to discuss mainly child labor. And child labor is defined as children below 18 who are engaged in hazardous work, and the children who work below the minimum age for work, in most countries, 15 years old. The elimination of child labor by 2025 is included in SDGs, as well as the eradication of forced labor, modern slavery, and human trafficking by 2030. We have found that the description of this session was different from actually ours. So I'd like to briefly explain what this session is about. So, yes, in order to achieve SDG 8.7, collaboration between CSOs working in the field, government formulating implementing policies, and business employing workers is crucial. This session provides model cases of CSO business government collaboration and discusses how to accelerate efforts to eliminate child labor, forced labor, modern slavery, and human trafficking through partnerships in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and a year before the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. We hope that discussion will contribute to increasing collaborative efforts towards the achievement of SDG 8.7. For your information, the CIVIC20 is an independent engagement group of G20 and is a global platform for civil society organizations in the G20 process, delivering civil society's demands to the world leaders. C20 of the G20 host country organizes the C20 summit. This year is Saudi Arabia, and last year was Japan. President of ACE, Yuka Iwatsuki, was chair of C20 in 2019. For more information, you can post comments and questions in the chat box. Please write names of panelists to whom you want to ask questions. After all the presentations, we try to answer as many questions as possible. We'll start the breakout session and Anushka to deliver an opening remark. Alliance 8.7 is a global partnership which plays a leading role in promoting the achievement of SDG 8.7. Anush, can I ask you?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank ACE for organizing, along with C20, this breakout session. It is a very welcome endeavor in its timing while we are going through an unprecedented health crisis with tremendous social and economic consequences. It is also very promising in its aim to promote CSO business-government collaboration in the eve of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor in 2021. The universal ratification of the ILO Convention 182 on the elimination of the worst forms of child labor this summer by its 187 government members is a powerful demonstration of the global consensus on the protection of children's fundamental rights and it is a source of hope for so many of them around the world. I'd like also to stress the tireless work of the CSOs who have spared no efforts and are mobilized every day to make sure that the elimination of child labor becomes a reality. I would add, if I may, that their endeavor is timely more than ever because of the ongoing pandemic crisis and its dramatic consequences on the achievement of Target 8.7. The crisis has rapidly become existential for those of our people facing unemployment, the loss of income, lack of social protection, and lack of education. And it might reverse a generation of progress against child labor we built step by step for the benefit of the most disadvantaged of them because of the consequences of the crisis on disadvantaged working people and their families all over the world. To rise to those challenges, at our Alliance 8.7 level, we have already demonstrated ways and means to join forces. Through our global partnership, we have created synergies since 2016 by gathering a very large number of stakeholders, more than 200 of them, including governments, UN entities, and regional organizations, workers and employers' representatives, business platforms, civil society organizations, and other relevant stakeholders. The Alliance 8.7 has therefore the moral responsibility and the advocating capacity to draw the attention of the international community to violations of the rule of law and foster commitment to respect it. There is also now an urgent need to show the way and achieve progress in the field in countries most exposed to the risk of infringement. The Alliance 8.7 pathfinders are precisely those countries that have volunteered to accelerate the pace of eradication of child labor and forced labor at their level within the Target 8.7 timeframe. Last year, we presented for the first time a digital report that covered actions undertaken by the first 9 Pathfinder countries. With many others having started their national processes, now we were pleased to present last July the second version of the Pathfinder e-report, which highlights significant progress they have achieved, such as strengthening their legal frameworks, creating intersectoral coordination mechanisms, producing knowledge to inform policy, and raising awareness on fundamental rights violations with child labor and forced labor on top of them. As you see, the political resolve is present at the government level, and we have spent useful time around building methodology and frameworking it. To show progress, we need now urgently to plan concrete actions with long-lasting effects. This is why I am very mindful of the actions to take that you may recommend through this session. Also mindful of the model cases of CSO business-government collaborations that you may put forward with a view to achieving our common goal in the very challenging timeline of the SDG 8.7. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anush. It was really our pleasure. We really congratulated the universal ratification of ILO Convention 182, really. So I hope that there will be a momentum to really accelerate our efforts. Thank you very much. So next, we'd like to ask Mr. Kailash Satyarthi to deliver a keynote speech. He was awarded Nobel Peace Prize in 2014, and he has rescued more than 87,000 children from child labor and bonded labor for many, many years. And he's also a founder of the Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation. Kailash, can I ask you now?
Yes, sure. Thank you, dear sisters and brothers, my dear young friends. Everybody is talking about the universal ratification of Convention 182, the ILO Convention on the Worst Forms of Child Labor. Of course, it's a matter of celebration. But let me tell you that this convention was born out of impatience. My impatience and the impatience of hundreds of millions of children in the world. The impatience of thousands of the young people and the social workers, the NGO workers, trade unionists, teachers across the globe. This was the result of anger, my anger and anger of all those whom I am naming. My children, my teachers, my workers, and the NGOs. Therefore, this universal ratification must not create only a sense of responsibility, which is obvious, but it must build the sense of accountability. Accountability of all stakeholders. When I am talking today, it's not a matter of pleasure. Each time when I talk, I feel ashamed. We are talking about our children who are sold and bought like animals and sometimes in lesser prices than the animals. How long we will keep on talking that children are producing wealth at the cost of their freedom, their education, their dreams, and their health? For the people who enjoy making money and you use the products made by children. And therefore, dear friends, we have to be very clear that the world was not on track to achieve the commitment made in the Sustainable Development Goals to end all forms of child labor by 2025. There were apprehensions that at least 121 million children will still remain in child labor. Now, this pandemic has brought new challenges. For 40 years, in my fight against child labor in India and worldwide, I experienced that there were so many excuses used by the people who benefit out of it. COVID-19 must not be used as an excuse. We have to be very clear about it. Dear friends, the moral leaders, Nobel laureates, and many more world leaders joined hands together. Along with the young people under the umbrella of 100 million campaign and the laureates and leaders for children, demanded that there must be fair share for children. At least 20% of the COVID-19 related funds, the COVID response funds or COVID aid, must be allocated for most marginalized 20% children and their families across the globe. We have raised this voice because we have seen that during last few months, $8 trillion have been allocated by the rich countries in this regard, but only 0.13% of it was allocated for the poorest children and the most needy people of the world. This is unacceptable. This is injustice. Dear friends, we are also demanding that there should be a global social protection fund established. We have seen that wherever the social protection programs were on place, we have seen the decrease in child labor. We have seen the retention and completion of school education. Secondly, we are also demanding that if we have to bring this whole discourse related to child labor on track again, then there should be a compulsory global supply chain legislation. The good news is that Netherlands did it. Germany has it in pipeline. There is some discussion going on in many more countries. But a good silver lining comes from the European Commission when they brought this plan inside their new Green Deal, and hopefully it will be done. Therefore, dear friends, when we are talking about G20, G20 has much more responsibility. We have seen that the G20 countries have not so far did any remarkable job in cancelling the debt of the poorest countries, the low-income countries. And it would be very difficult for the low-income countries to revive their economies. We know that a larger number of people will fall into child labor. Children will fall into child labor and people into poverty and hunger. And therefore, it is their moral responsibility, and particularly to focus on Africa. Finally, dear friends, when we will be meeting and talking on this, we have to talk with the same impatience. We have to talk with the same anger. We have to convert that impatience into urgency. We have to convert this anger into action. We have to build the strongest possible collaborations and cooperation. Together we can achieve it. And there is a great opportunity next year when the UN would be observing the year to end child labor. We should all come together. We may have several priorities and several issues, but if we do not want to reverse, to turn the clock back, and if we don't want to lose the entire generation, then dear friends, come together, march together. Let us march from exploitation to education. Let us march together, dear friends, dear sisters and brothers, from this darkness to light. Let us march from injustice to justice. Let us march from mortality to divinity, to immortality. Let us march. Thank you so much.
Leslie, thank you so much for your speech. And thank you very much for spending time with us when you are extremely busy with helping children and also helping children affected by COVID-19. And your important words and your valuable words we should keep in mind, and we should really make more effort to advocate to the government, I thought. Thank you very much. But unfortunately, you have to leave now. Do you?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, I have to.
Yes.
But I wish all the success, and I
Yes.
very much count on ACE. I very much count on this great group who is assembled today. All my sisters and brothers who are taking part today, I have full faith on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kailash-ji.
Yes, and we are, thank you. And we and all the participants in this session really, really appreciate your participation. We'd like to thank you again. Thank you very much and see you soon.
See you. See you physically.
Yes, hopefully, yes. All right. So now we would like to start a panel discussion. As informed in the beginning, we have 4 distinguished guests today: Anush, Lisa, Yuka, and hopefully Andy soon. And thank you very much for your participation in this session as panelists. As I explained in the beginning, SDG 8.7 mentioned the elimination of all forms of child labor by 2025 and the eradication of forced labor, modern slavery, and human trafficking by 2030. However, 152 million children are engaged in child labor. So in order to achieve SDG 8.7, we really have to accelerate the collaboration between CSOs, business, and governments. That is really key to the solution, we believe. So in this panel discussion, the panelists provide model cases of CSO business government collaboration from different positions and discusses how to accelerate our efforts in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, as just Kailash said. So I'd like to share the PowerPoint presentation again, and that is this one. So firstly, we'll ask Anush to speak about the Alliance 8.7, which is a global partnership. And that includes governments, business, and trade unions, and partly CSO. So, and secondly, Lisa is going to talk about the case of government business collaboration supported by CSO. And thirdly, Yuka is going to talk about a case of CSO government collaboration, as well as a CSO business collaboration. CSO business government, so multi-stakeholder collaboration in Ghana. And then, as I said, we'll have a Q&A session. So you can post comments and questions in the chat box during the presentations, and please write names of the panelists to whom you want to ask questions clearly. All right then. Firstly, I'd like to invite Ms. Anush Carver. She's currently the French government representative to the International Labour Organization governing body and the French senior task force officer to the G7, G20 for labor, employment, and social protection policies. She has chaired Alliance 8.7 since June 2019. She was formerly Deputy Director of the Minister of Labor's Cabinet and the Counselor to the President of the French Parliament, in charge of social and territorial cohesion policies. Anush, could I ask you to take the floor now?
Thank you very much, Masako. As I said earlier, and as it was mentioned by Kailash Satyarthi, the pandemic crisis has rapidly become existential for those of our people facing unemployment, the loss of income, lack of social protection, and education. And as I said, it might reverse a generation of progress against child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking we built step by step. Kailash put the stress on the fact that we need accountability. This is why we are trying now with our Pathfinder countries and within our global coordination committee to come up with very precise criteria for measuring progress on the topics that we are putting forward with our Pathfinder countries and all over the world. But the fact is that we are facing a very important backlash right now, as it was said, uh, because of this pandemic crisis. Like previous crises, but at an exceptional scale, the health crisis we are facing has highlighted that in the absence of adequate social protection for all, the most vulnerable will fall in the most abject poverty, risking increases in fundamental human rights violations. Our answer and the Alliance's answer to this exceptional situation must therefore be strong and global, based on international solidarity and cooperation. The latest report, as of 2 days ago, from the World Bank shows that the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to push between 88 and 115 million people into extreme poverty in 2020, with the total rising to as many as 150 million by 2021, depending on the severity of the economic contraction. Extreme poverty, defined as living on less than 1.90 US dollars, is likely to affect between 9.1 and 9.4% of the world's population in 2020. Had the pandemic not convulsed the globe, the poverty rate, the World Bank says, was expected to drop to 7.9% in 2020. And the report also finds that many of the new poor will be in countries that already have high poverty rates, so there is no excuse, but also a number of middle income countries will also see significant numbers of people slip below the extreme poverty line. And also increasing numbers of urban dwellers are expected to fall into extreme poverty, which has traditionally affected people in rural areas. All these effects are worsening the situation of child labor in countries that are facing the crisis very dramatically. The report finally argues that without policy actions, the COVID-19 crisis may trigger cycles of higher income inequality, lower social mobility among the vulnerable, and lower resilience to future shocks. So as you can see, right now, among the Alliance 8.7 countries, we must go and seek for action to at least not worsen the situation of child labor in these countries. And as an immediate response to COVID-19, countries in the world have introduced temporary social protection measures to facilitate access to much needed healthcare, to provide income security to workers, families, and children that were affected either by the COVID or by the lockdown. This is an evidence that extending social protection floors is therefore feasible when governments have the political will to do so, and if needed, when they can benefit from appropriate external support. And the Alliance can bring this external support with its network, with its stakeholders, to those countries who are willing to prevent children and their families to fall into extreme poverty. At the G20 level, as we are in the C20 framework, France has put forward the fact that recovery will only be sustained and future crises mitigated if countries are able to build on or transform temporary measures into adequate and responsive social protection systems worldwide. This adequate and responsive social protection system includes establishing children allowances, basic income security for families and children, providing access to nutrition, education, and care. So for this resilience to become a reality, international organizations, governments, workers and employers, businesses, but CSOs also need to work hand in hand to achieve universal social protection, which is the aim of SDG Target 1.3. This is essential if we want to achieve SDG 8.7. We are far from consensus on this topic worldwide. This is why a push from the C20 to obtain commitment on both SDG Target 1.3 and 8.7 at the G20 leaders level would be very helpful, in fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, News. Yeah, we really understand this current situation, and that is really valuable for us to know. We learned a lot today. Thank you so much. Excuse me. And now, secondly, I'd like to introduce Ms. Alisa Sin, Head of Government Advocacy Walk-Free Foundation. She was previously an Australian senator in the Australian Parliament and has a long history of working in the human rights space. Lisa was instrumental in the development of Australia's first modern slavery act. So she's going to speak under the title of Work, Freedom, and Slavery as a case of government and business collaboration. Lisa, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Masako, and thank you to ACE for organising this panel session, and to the C20. I'm really pleased to be joining my fellow panellists and to promote, as this session is called, CSO Business and Government Collaboration in the lead up to the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labour towards the achievement of SDG 8.7. I'm just going to share my screen. As you may know, Walk Free is an international human rights organisation working to end modern slavery globally within our lifetime. Together with the ILO and the IOM, we produce the world's leading data set on modern slavery, the Global Estimates of Slavery, which provides the best available data on the scale and regional distribution of modern slavery. Walk Free's Global Slavery Index is a tool for citizens, NGOs, business and governments to understand the size of the problem, existing responses, and contributing factors so that they can advocate for and build sound policies that will eradicate modern slavery. The 2018 Global Slavery Index tells us that there are an estimated 40.3 million people living in modern slavery globally. 24.9 million are in forced labour. In our latest edition, we also included a short list of products at highest risk of forced labour by source country, many of which, of course, also include child labour. This is based on 15 products that appeared most frequently in the 2016 US Department of Labor's list of goods produced by forced labour and child labour. And since that time, of course, the US Department has just recently produced the 2020 list of goods produced by child labour or forced labour, which I'm sure would show a more up-to-date picture. Walk Free also targets progress to eradicate all forms of modern slavery under SDG 8.7 through our Measurement Action Freedom Report, which is a tool to understand existing laws and policies, as well as the gaps in government responses to modern slavery. We measure government progress towards achieving SDG 8.7 and eradicating modern slavery across 5 milestones. Our MAF report tells us that the world will not deliver on SDG 8.7 by the 2030 target rate. Overall, action remains too slow, with only small improvements across the milestones measured, which is why the Bali Process Government and Business Forum was established in 2017, because there was a clear need for government and the private sector to work together to combat child labour, forced labour, and human trafficking. This new initiative brought together influential business leaders and ministers from the Indo-Pacific region to consider ways to prevent and combat human trafficking, forced labour, child labour, and modern slavery. It was the first of its kind in the Indo-Pacific region and is a positive step forward towards a kind of collaboration between government and business that is needed to end child labour, forced labour, human trafficking, and modern slavery. Walk Free acts as the secretariat for the Bali Process Government and Business Forum. It brings together government ministers and business leaders from 45 countries to combat these crimes. Our guiding framework, the Acknowledge, Act, Advance recommendations, or the AAA recommendations as they're known, were endorsed by Bali Process member states and business leaders at the 2018 Ministerial Conference. These principles set out a framework for action on supply chain transparency, ethical recruitment, worker protection, and redress. In fact, the AAA recommendations are the first regional policy document agreed to by governments and business, call them to take action to eradicate human trafficking, forced labour, modern slavery, and child labour across the Indo-Pacific region. Acknowledge encourages deeper understanding by business and government of the scale and challenges associated with these transnational crimes. These crimes also undermine economic growth by contributing to inefficient labour markets, depressing wage rates, and causing significant social costs. Consumer choice is also increasingly driven by ethical considerations. ACT, the second recommendation, encourages businesses to implement ethical business practices and governments to strengthen policy and legislative frameworks. Clear and consistent policies and legislation also offers an attractive investment destination for business. Advance recognises that this government and business forum is at a pivotal stage of development, and that the business co-chairs and the secretariat, Walk Free, will develop a governance framework that ensures the ongoing sustainability and effectiveness of this forum. However, as we have heard tonight from Kailash Satyarthi and from Unesha, we are in a time where the COVID pandemic has placed tremendous impact on some of the most vulnerable in the world. So Walk Free's Protecting People in a Pandemic report outlines the urgent collaboration that is needed to protect vulnerable workers and prevent exploitation. Workers are stranded without means of support, resulting in grave health and humanitarian risks. Cramped living and working conditions and restricted access to testing, healthcare increases the risk of COVID-19 and community transmission. Women are at the front line of the crisis and are at increased risk of exploitation. Xenophobia and discrimination against migrants is leading to increased violence and exploitation, and widespread job losses, the shutdown of regular migration pathways, and reduced scrutiny of labour standards all increases vulnerability. And of course, there are some specific industries that are at risk from this COVID-19 pandemic. Our action plan to protect vulnerable workers outlines a way forward for business and government to accelerate their efforts during this pandemic. For business, it should facilitate access to testing and healthcare. It should ensure pay, overtime, sick leave, and other statutory benefits are paid to workers. It should ensure workers can return home if they wish to, ensure free access to passports and identity documents, fund travel costs, and liaise with host or destination countries on travel restrictions and emergency repatriation. And it should pay for goods that have already been produced or are in production and provide support to enable suppliers continue to employ and pay their workers. Similarly, government should ensure access to testing and healthcare for all, regardless of citizenship or immigration status. It should provide emergency financial support to all vulnerable workers. It should ensure automatically extending temporary visas and grant amnesty for vulnerable workers. It should uphold labour standards, including both living and working conditions, and take measures to combat increased vulnerability to exploitation and forced labour. And it should strongly condemn xenophobic behaviour and discrimination and ensure borders are open to returning citizens or ensure protection for those unable to return home and that funds can be remitted during lockdowns. It is clear that as civil society, we need to ensure that modern slavery is firmly on the G20 agenda. We need to collaborate to combat child labour, forced labour, human trafficking and exploitation at the business, government and civil society level to ensure that G20 leaders commit to take actions to eradicate these heinous crimes and strengthen policy and legislation frameworks. So business, as outlined in the AAA Bali process recommendations that I have shared today. So to achieve this, Walk Free calls for child and forced labour, human trafficking and modern slavery to be on the agenda for G20 leaders as we move into the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labour towards the achievement of SDG 8.7. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Yeah, it's really wonderful to have the collaboration between the business and ministers, really high position of the politicians. And we really think that things are going forward and the collaboration proceeds. Yes. And now, again, I have an announcement that unfortunately, Anush has to leave sometime soon. So can I ask Anush to say some words? For the moment, we don't have any question to you. So if you would like to make some comments, would you like to do? And and after your comments, if the time allows you, you can stay a little bit and listen to you guys' presentation as well. So before leaving, words?
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I must unfortunately leave in a few minutes. I really wanted to thank Lisa for her presentation. It was very important to put the emphasis on evidence and data, which is a very important point, and Walk3 has always been very helpful to all international organizations that have the ILO, the IOM, and the Alliance to have evidence and put figures, and by saying figures, also faces on, you know, these very big violence, these huge violations of human rights. This is the first point I wanted to put forward. The second one is about, so identification is very important. The second one is about accountability. And it is very important again to say that international legislation now applies to all 187 governments that have ratified the Convention 182 of the ILO. Violation of this convention is something governments should be aware of, but we have not all the time as governments have the good tools to monitor, you know, the implementation of these conventions. So it is very important for civil society, for employers' representatives, but also, workers and representatives, but also employers' representatives to give us insight about that and be watchdogs of violations of this very important convention, international standard that is applicable to all 187 governments that ratified it. So this is the second point I wanted to make. And of course, I think it is very important for the G20 leaders to commit themselves on this issue, on the issue of eradication of child labor and also about modern slavery. We had put this commitment at my capacity, at my national capacity, in the agenda of the ministers of employment and labor and employment. So in the declaration of the G20 ministers of labor and employment, we have a specific mention to Alliance, not to Alliance 8.7, but to Target 8.7, and the eradication of child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery. So it is a very important point, but now we should all push together so that it becomes visible at the Leaders Summit, of course. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for very important comments. And really now the next, actually, you guys going to talk about the G20 and C20 and so on. So as long as time allows you, can you stay and listen to her? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anush. Thank you. Now, can I introduce Ms. Yuka Iwatsuki, President, co-founder of Action Against Child Exploitation. And she and I actually joined the Global March Against Child Labor in 1997, which was initiated by Kailash. She established ACE and developed it as a leading NGO in Japan for child labor. She was the chair of the C20 Japan last year. So she's now going to talk about a case of CSOs and government collaboration, as well as CSO business-government collaboration. Yuka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Masako, and thank you all the panelists for the great presentation. So let me share my experience in organizing SDG 8.7 dialogue between CSOs and government, and also some experience from ACE. So my name is Yuka. I'm President of Action Against Child Exploitation. Our purpose is to transform the world into a place where all children are free to shape their own lives and capable of building a society that they want to live in. So we started in 1997, actually in response to Kailash's call to organize the global march around the world. So we started in 1997, and Since then, we withdrew 2,360 children from child labor trafficking, and 30,000 children benefited from school and community improvements. We have realized this through our partners. One is in Ghana called CRADA, and they're focusing on child labor in cocoa industry. And the other one is in India, it's called SPEED, and it's focusing on cotton producing area. My involvement in G20 advocacy has actually started last year, that I was asked to become the chair of the C20. So I had a privilege to hand over C20 policy pack to G20 2019 presidency, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, together with my colleagues from Argentina and Saudi Arabia. So let me briefly go over what has been said about the elimination of child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery in the G20 context. In Leaders' Declaration, it was mentioned in Germany and Argentina and Japan. So I'm hoping that this year it will be the same in Saudi Arabia. And in the G20 Labor and Employment Ministers Meeting Minister Declaration, it has been mentioned in more detail. As Anush mentioned, it has been referred to as recommitment in Saudi Arabia. I'd like to bring your attention to G20 strategies to eradicate child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery in the world of work in annex of the LEMM Ministerial Declaration, which was agreed in Argentina in 2018. Amongst strategies, I'd like to highlight 3 points. First one is recognize the importance of the comprehensive and integrated approach, so that we need to address the root cause as well. And number 4 is to foster social dialogue and new partnership, including with the private sector and civil society organizations. So this is exactly the theme that we are talking tonight. And 5 is promote due diligence and transparency in global supply chains. So initially, in the beginning of this session, Kailash mentioned about the progress in EU, that they are trying to make the due diligence law. And I think these movements are very welcomed in the context of G20 strategies. But I'd like to point out that G20 need a mechanism to check if each country is doing what they have already agreed. So my recommendation is to make progress reports mandatory for each country to submit every year to the EWG on these strategies for sharing best practices and experience. The reason why I'm saying this is because we thought that was very effective. Through the experience, we organized SDG 8.7 dialogue. The last year, we organized SDG 8.7 dialogue in Japan for 3 times. So the purpose of this dialogue was to share examples and case studies of how each government is working on the issue implicated in SDG 8.7 and discuss what are the challenges and possibilities for the G20 in promoting and undertaking for the action in collaboration with CSOs. And these were the participants countries, and ILO and OECD were also present. So in total, 80 participants from 10 countries, organizations were involved in this process. So this is the photo for the first roundtable we had. That was in February, and the second one was at the we organized it as a dinner, and this SDG dinner was actually featured in the newspaper called Japan Times, which is the prominent English newspaper in Japan. So it went worldwide. And third one, we organized it right after the ministers' meeting took place in Matsuyama in Japan. So through these dialogues, we learned some things. So I'd like to share that with you. The common challenges we faced was lack of precise data on child labor and insufficient implementation. I echo with Anush about the great work on Work Free Foundation, because they shed light on the identification and the reality of the slavery and modern slavery and so on. So I think that was a very good information that they made available to all the stakeholders. But still, we need some precise data in each country. And also there is insufficient implementation on legislation and also the program. but opportunities are here. And actually, these opportunities are already mentioned earlier. So the universal certification has already been realized, and the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor is coming very soon. Although we are in the face of COVID-19 challenges, and more so we need to focus what innovative way we can do to achieve SDG 8.7, I think. So actions are that addressing the root cause and also utilizing the supply chain report that's been submitted to G20 to ask businesses to work on the elimination of child labor within their supply chain. So through working through the chain of the supply in the businesses, it can enhance more efforts with different stakeholders. So that is the strength of having more people and organizations involved in the issue. And also, what we noticed was the importance of exchanging information and effective practices. Actually, delegations to G20 Employment Working Group meet maybe 4 times a year, but they don't actually have much time sharing their experience and progresses amongst themselves in the session. So we provided the opportunity for them to learn from each other and to kind of communicate and collaborate each other. So I think these sharing information and knowing what each country is doing is very important for advancing each government's progress. So that's why I'm proposing to have the progress report mandatory for the countries in G20 context. And also, one of the delegates mentioned that this SDG 8.7 dialogue was very useful and should be replicated as a model of CSO government collaboration. So we took it as a very great compliment. So if I may point out 4 points to fill the lack of implementation, my first recommendation is an area-based integrated approach by CSOs. Spark project is a project ACE has been doing in Ghana, and I will briefly introduce it later. But similar programs has been already been done in many parts of different countries. And the Child Friendly Village done by BBA and Global March is one of the great models that has been working on as an area-based approach. And area-based approach is very effective because it involves community and it sustains the impact. When we business and human rights, ESG investments, the leverage and supply chain. Third one is the governmental commitments. As mentioned earlier, social protection became very important in our context right now. So effective implementation of labor and social protection policies are really crucial in protecting children from hazardous work. And international cooperation resource mobilization is also needed. And public procurement could be one of the leverage policy for the business to do ethical business more seriously. So the legislation to set level playing field for businesses is one of the very important role for the government. And actually, it is only the government who can make the legislation. So it is very important in terms of their responsibility. So finally, the effective engagement of businesses. As you know, we have seen so many industry-wide dialogue and agreements and standard settings. I know there are so many of them in Netherlands and so on, but actually in Japan, it has started as well. So this year, JICA has launched a COCOA sustainability platform, and it has a wide range of businesses involved in COCOA business. So I'm glad that these engagements are happening also in Japan and to collaborate each other and to make efforts collectively. So let me briefly introduce what we do in Ghana. This is called project, and we have 3 pillars. One is child protection and education. Second is a better income and household finance. And third is capacity building of a community. So through these activities, we have made some results, and we believe that this is effective because after we finish the project in 2 to 3 years, the impact of the program sustains because these volunteers who sustain child labor monitoring system are motivated and they keep working even though the program has already ended funding. So if we can have this kind of system in place, it is very effective to monitor and eradicate child labor. Another thing I like to just share is that we had a unique development of the engagement with companies. It all started with this campaign called One Choco for One Smile. And it was initially the marketing campaign that one chocolate would incur 1 yen donation. And this campaign has supported significantly for us to continue our Smile Ghana project. And then these cacaos made in these communities has been imported to Japan. And so many companies and brands, actually 21 companies brands are now using a cocoa in 80 items. And then they also give us some donation back to us. And so this model is also involving consumers because if they buy these products, they can contribute to the solution of child labor. So I think this is very unique because it has changed the supply chain and also it is creating child labor-free chocolate market. So lastly, I'd like to tell you about child labor-free zone. And Andy will probably speak in detail what he has been done in this context. So this is the concept the Ghanaian government has in the NAP, a National Action Plan. And we came to encounter the people from Ghanaian government and we realized that what we are aiming for is very similar. So we started to work together since 2018 and now the guidelines are there. So now we are in the phase of trying to implement child labor-free zone. So this is something hopefully to scale up the area-based approach to the country level. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yuka. We hope that our activities to promote collaboration among multiple stakeholders to understand our activities. Thank you so much. And lastly, as the last panelist, I'd like to invite Mr. Andrew Adoche-Tagoe, Head of Rural Workers Organization Program at the General Agricultural Workers Union of the Ghana Trade Union Congress. He's also a board member of Global March Against Child Labor. He's an agricultural engineer by training and a trade unionist by profession. He has developed various strategies and models to address child labor and child trafficking and promote decent work in the value chains of cocoa, oil palm, rice, and fishing. He's going to talk about the child labor-free zone in Ghana as a case of CSO-Business-Government multi-stakeholder collaboration, and AC is part of this. Andy, hello, how are you?
It is afternoon in Ghana,
Yes.
so allow me to greet all of you. Good afternoon. I know the times are different, but it's afternoon in Ghana. The sun is beautiful. And I want to thank the other panelists for the good presentation. I want to thank Yuka too and the ST for the collaboration. Indeed, your AC is a household name in Ghana, in the ministries and in cocoa communities. So I want to thank you for this Ghana and Japan collaboration. My topic will surely be simply on child labor free zones and how we are doing it in Ghana. Ghana is a pathfinder country, and for that matter, it has responsibilities towards implementation of protocols of 8.7. So recently we have engaged with Global March to do advocacy to ensure that the government of Ghana deals with issues and implement Alliance 8.7 tenets to cover our work. Directly, I want to go straight to child labor free zone, since that is my mission for today. And I must emphasize that in the past few years since we came into contact with ACE, Ghana had moved very fast in the adoption of a methodology of a child labor free zone as the way to go. I must say that there are a number of challenges that Ghana had faced in terms of child labor. We have a very large informal economy. Nearly 90% of our economy is very informal, made up of small farmers and peasant farmers in far rural communities. And then we also have a very weak infrastructure. Our roads are not very good when it comes to the informal economy or going to the rural areas where the problem is. The road infrastructure is not very good. And then we in some areas we have moved away from the state of denial that there is no child labor in the agriculture and generally in cocoa production. Now there is a certain level of acceptance, but there is low investment in the area of addressing. And then we had a challenge because before the child labor free zone or child friendly villages came in, we were doing our own work. We had the result of that is that we do more programs that does not include the communities, and we have more children rather out of school, and the numbers keep going up even in Africa. When we have done different, the incidents keep going up. We have more boys in fishing, we have some in cocoa, in agrochemicals, and then in indecent jobs. But then what I will say is that we have done many things that did not address child labor. That is, we did not tackle root causes, but going to identify children, give them school supplies, and then put them in school and leave the real root causes out. And for us, that is what gave birth. When I say the Toko model is a community here, that is our child labor free zone community that we have worked in. And as a trade union, we have domesticated that one using integrated area basis approaches like Yuka had just said. Now, the strategy is hinged on the number of things. That is strengthening the capacity of the informal economy workers. So this is principally ownership by informal people in communities to combat child labor and the child trafficking through enhanced social responsibility, occupational safety, and health, and improved productivity. Basically, we call for paradigm shift. That is from symptoms to preventing and then tackling root causes. That is promoting due diligence within the supply chains. The three models of the Toko model, or what we call the child labor free zone, is hinged on three pillars. One component one is organizing within the informal economy. For us, component two is a social mobilization through sensitization and capacity building. And then component three is knowledge sharing. In the next 3 minutes, we shall not go into details, but we shall have an idea what it is. And for us, a typical child labor free zone looks like this. It has various components. It has the communities, because they are very remote, and then Yuka will bear with me. In Ghana, the chief is stronger than the national constitution at his community. So we use the chief to strengthen our local policies. We also involve the children. And then whenever a child is removed from child labor, the model believes that when a child is removed, there is a labor gap that is created. So we have to negotiate for adults to receive decent incomes so that they can replace the children, do the work that the children are doing. Otherwise, when we take the children out and you don't put somebody back there, the children will come back. And that has been our experience before the child labor free zone concept we have employed now. We have had a lot of communication in the community because there is a lot of attitudinal change that is needed within the communities. because they have grown to accept that using children to do cocoa, fishing, and agriculture is normal. But we needed a lot of things. So in a typical child labor-free zone, we also have what we learned from our colleagues in the MVF Foundation in India, that is the bridge school, that children who are above their normal school going age, we find a system for them to re-engage into school. Then we create a monitoring system in the community through community child protection committees. So we have a community structure that responds to the child trafficking, child labor at the community level. So it's not just a program, a project, but it's a program that is integrated into community structures. Indeed, I can say that before then, we have had 99 ways of not addressing child labor. But we think, and we are very strong, and have convinced government and the rest and shown that the one way to go about addressing child labor in rural communities is through building community systems and community structures. And that is what we find in what Yuka had just presented, which I'm re-echoing. That is the child labor-free zones and the child-friendly villages, as we do in the global march. So, like I've said, the key outputs are that we have structures and systems are created to at the community level to halt the entry of new children into system, into child labor, into forced labor, into modern slavery, into human trafficking in all its forms at the community level. There are systems in place to halt it if you are not in it already. Our target had been over 50 communities in fishing, cocoa, oil palm that we have created child labor free zone. And we're very happy to hear that most of Japan's chocolate is gradually eaten from child labor free zones that our partners AC, CRADA, and then S, we are creating gradually. So cocoa that is consumed in Japan and the rest of the world must come from child labor free zone. Indeed, not just certification processes in terms of this thing. This is what we have created, which we think is verifiable, and it is community participation, and communities own the whole process. And when the chief in Ghana says that my community is a child labor-free zone, it's a big constitutional issue at the community that everybody will work towards ensuring that there is no child labor in the community. And this hinges on the whole community development model. That is not just a project that has an expiry date, but this is a project that lives in the community forever. So it's a program, actually, we call it. So that is it, and it also helps to develop the infrastructure of the community. I'm just re-echoing and re-hatching the child labor-free zone concept. We have also hinged it, of course, I am a trade unionist, to organizing cocoa farmers into their own cooperatives, so that once they are organized, then the cooperative also have it as a model that we are not going to use children. So the community, the churches, the schools, children are involved, school teachers are involved, and it's a whole package in the community that ensures that we have no, and then beyond this, cocoa must provide good incomes for the cocoa farmers. That is basically the fact. But as human beings, of course, we also develop other sources of livelihoods so that people can have alternative livelihoods. So we have used cocoa waste products to develop very delicacious soap, which is very good for the black skin, and it's also very good even for the white skin that our people talk about. This to increase incomes for other people. And then we are working towards having for us a West African ECOWAS cocoa farmers against child labor, so that the program we are doing on child labor free zones in Ghana is not only in Ghana, but we are looking also at other cooperatives and colleagues in the West Africa. So, and then to declare a child labor free zone, we work with ACE, and today we are happy. Let me show you this book. The government of Ghana have developed this book, which is the protocols and guidelines that we are going to use for every community in Ghana to ensure that when we say there is no child labor, there is no child labor, and you can come and verify. So the government will establish those areas. So when you are eating chocolate from Ghana, then or from Japan, you can know that it's coming from a child labor free zone. So at that zone, workers are working decently with a union in place, and children are out of labor and into school. And then we can happily see that CRADA, which is the representative of ACE in Ghana, is captured here. My union is here, and then the ILO. We are very, very proud of this, that we help the Ghana government to develop. So basically, as a concept, you know, in entering the communities in Ghana, if you want to greet people and call people to action, you say "Cho boy." So when I say "Cho boy," you just respond with a fist, "Hey." So let's please rehearse that one on the platform. That is call to action in the child labor free zone. Cho boy. Hey.
Oi.
Andy, so boy,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
We are running out of time. Can you wrap up if possible?
Okay. Again?
Yes. Yeah, we are running out of time, 10 minutes left. So if you could wrap up your presentation,
Okay.
we'd be happy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think I am at the end of my presentation, and on my presentation you have copies. There are characteristics of a child labor free zone, and it is hinged on community structures and community systems, and we think that this is the way to go now, and people should consume chocolate that comes from a child labor free zone. I thank you, and you see my boy, he says he's happy to go to school, although he has no school uniforms and he has nothing, but he's happy to go to school. I thank you very much for your attention. Cho boy! Thank you.
So boy, thank you. Thank you very much, Andy. Really, really interesting to hear that all the stories. And I'm sorry to make you in a hurry. So unfortunately, we don't have any questions from the floor. So lastly, can I ask each panelist to say a short comment in 1 minute each, in the order of Lisa, Andy, and Yuka. So Lisa, please.
Thank you, Masako, and very much thank you to ACE and C20 for organising this really informative panel session on how we can address and end child labour, and in the lead up, of course, to next year's UN International Year to Eliminate Child Labour. On behalf of Walk Free, we are pleased to be able to participate in this event. It's been very informative, and to share some of the ways that we are measuring addressing SDG 8.7, the data that we collect, the Global Slavery Index. Next year will be a new year for Walk Free's Global Slavery Index, so we will be working on that. And just today, in fact, Walk Free launched two things which I need to share. Our new website, which is walkfree.org, and a new report called Stacked Odds, which looks at the impact of gender on modern slavery for women and girls. A groundbreaking report that takes a broader lens to the issues of forced labour, human trafficking, modern slavery. So I encourage you to download that on Walk Free's website. And thank you. We look forward to continuing to work with you and other civil society partners in ensuring that we indeed end modern slavery, all its forms, in our generation.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And now, Andy, can you please? In a minute.
In 1 minute, I want to also thank ACE for this privilege. In fact, indeed, you have done a great job from Ghana, West Africa, and then to Japan. So we want to thank you very much. And I just want to also let my colleagues, Lisa and the rest know, Masako, you should know that just last week, GAWU, my organization, was named as the 2020 Labor Rights Defender by the International Labour Rights Forum, and an award was presented to us, and it is congratulations to us all. And then we are looking forward to coming to Japan. COVID should go away. We come to Japan to eat chocolate that is made from Ghana cocoa, but made in Japan. So Japan chocolate from Ghana cocoa. We also want to thank our colleagues from Deloitte for coming to Ghana and working with us all. So thank you very much, and looking forward to a child labor free zone. Choboy!
Choboy, Andy, thank you so much. And finally, I'd like to ask Yuka, and following her comments, I'd also like to ask to her the concluding remark. Then we'd like to close the session. Thank you. Yuka, please.
Thank you, Masako. I'd like to extend my deep gratitude to all the panelists who have attended this session, and I would like to C20 host for allowing us to session, and I think it was a very meaningful session. And I echo with Lisa about the gap of the implementation and legislations, and I think one of the CSO's role is to remind the gap to the government. So I think in that sense, we have pointed out the gaps that there are in the context of child labor and modern slavery and human trafficking, and also we also suggested how to fill the gap. So I in that sense, I'm very happy that we have covered those topics for the next year and coming years. So let me move on to my closing remarks for the audience. Actually, this is a C20 session, so it has its unique role in C20 process in the context of advocacy to Z20. So collective input in a session from speakers and audience contribute to the efforts to influence G20 leaders' agendas. This is one point that I'd like to share. And also, recording and summaries of outcomes of the sessions will be progressed to the relevant G20 working groups and structure. So in that sense, our session is deeply involved with employment working groups. So I'm hoping that our recommendations are presented to them. And thirdly, C20 communique is already there. So please take a look at it, and it will be submitted to G20 presidency. So thank you so much for your attendance. And I'd like to thank all the panelists for being with us. And I hope the next is UN Intervention of Child Labor. So let's work together for achieving SDG 8.7. So thank you so much.